I watched it twice so far, and
Wow.
I was lucky to be at the BAFTA screening like 2 weeks ago where
Oh,
you
right.
spoke. Yeah. And I soon as I saw it and I saw you break out your book, I was like, oh my gosh, what a what a designer to bring his book with him and to show people that. It's just really important to like show people those things. You know what I mean? Like that
Right.
it's tangible. These are
Yeah.
working drawings that produce and your team produces to fill this book to make this film. It's just wonderful. I loved it.
Oh, I really appreciate that. The whole thing with the script, it started as a lucky thing, really, because I brought it along with me, really, because it served as this wonderful sort of reference through the whole production. I mean, it was there right next to Pablo and I during the whole shoot. So the
Mhm.
book experienced the whole film. And I brought it along, and I think the good folks at Netflix saw it and said, wow, you should bring this around and show. So it was really their clever idea to keep showing up with it, and I'm very grateful they did. I had no idea that people would be so interested in this. I mean, it's a very old-fashioned production design technique. I mean, I think with the event of iPads and computers, I think maybe this is a bit of a lost art, but
Yes, I
for
agree.
me, it's a very, very important part of the design process. The tabs at the top are all the different sets, and the tabs down the side are all of Pablo's magical scenes, which he adds to the script. They're not part of the original Stephen Knight script. So it becomes this incredible document that everybody uses. Massimo, the costume designer, would often grab it off me to have a look at what was going on, or the hair and makeup department would borrow it often to see what or how we wanted Angie to look in certain scenes. And even this page that we're looking at here, you can see my drawings of and caricature in the middle there of Angie as Maria Callas
Yeah.
in the style of the original art that was on the wall around her. So if you look next to that tape recorder, there's a photograph, little tiny photograph of Maria, yeah, of Maria. And in the upper left and upper right are two sketches of Maria. And on the left hand side, those big images at the top and the bottom were a little color copies of the original art that I did that we put in the frames on the set.
Down
So
here. Also, your placement of
that's the
the
placement. Yes,
yeah.
that tells us what the placement is. And we wanted to be very accurate about that wall.
Since you had, you're recreating this life, did you go to her apartment? Is her apartment still around?
It
Yeah.
is still around.
Yeah.
We usually do this thing, Pablo and I, we backpack as part of the discovery process. Pablo's a poet. I'm always telling people this. He's a brilliant director, but he's kind of a poet. And for him, the way he immerses himself in the subject, other than the immense amount of reading that he does, is sort of a tour of all the places that the character would have been. We did the same thing on Spencer.
Mhm.
And the idea is that we can absorb, I suppose, the spirit of Maria by visiting her favorite restaurant, going to all the cafes that she hung out in, going and looking out of the window in Place Vendôme in France, where she stayed at the Ritz. All these places we went to, and we could never quite get into her apartment. But on the last day in Paris of a week's trip there, we were able to sneak in the back door. It had been sold and refurbished, completely gutted, but obviously the bones were still there, the rooms were still there. So we got to see
Wow.
exactly how Maria's apartment was. I wasn't allowed to take photographs or particularly uh, uh, do anything really. So any photographs that you see are me sort of sneakily sort of doing it under you know, sort of off the record because I wasn't really allowed to, but I had to record this very, very important historical place and sketch the floor plan so that I could recreate this on stage later.
I mean, I didn't know anything about her, which I think
Mm.
is sometimes the best to go into a film
Oh,
not
yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
and discovering these characters and discovering these sets and these locations and her life. And so, and it made me like just research her when I got done. I never knew she was with Onassis. Like it was just,
Right.
it's
Right.
such just a deep life to like focus on
I know.
after when coming off of and working with Pablo and Spencer, were there specific things that he wanted in the design for Maria?
He 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 was very, I think, very trusting in me. He said to me, just sort of do your thing. I mean, literally, he said, do what you did on Spencer, you know, discover who she is and start to create uh, a set and a backdrop to the story that services the story and is shootable and makes people feel like we're right there in
Yeah.
1977 in Paris. And so I went away and I did my usual thing. I just thought about it rather like you. I knew very little about her, just a footnote in secondary school, really, in music class about Maria Callas. I knew outside of that, I really didn't have any knowledge of her. So I immersed myself in the music. I got a couple of books. I did a lot of reading, looked at a lot of documentaries. And it seemed to me that what I needed to do for this set that you're looking at here was really effectively merge her past grandeur
Hmm.
with her now current day 1977 sort of uh I don't know, singular life, her loneliness, you know.
Loneliness, really.
So and even though she had Faruko and Bruna with her, she led a very solitary lifestyle. So really, it was a merger of the solitary lifestyle and this sort of past grandeur that I needed to somehow get into this apartment, and it was tricky. But I think the key was already there in the true history of Maria, which is that she allowed magazines in the 60s and 70s to come in and interview her in her home, but only in specific rooms, like her drawing room or her dining room, which were very grandiose and traditionally appointed and
Mm.
decorated with those huge chandeliers that I drove absolutely everybody nuts over because they yeah, there they are. You
Yeah.
know, the chandeliers were very, very big. And I remember getting told off because I said, I need them to be bigger. And so these chandeliers were real chandeliers that we extended with an extra row of candles
Oh,
to make
wow.
them that much bigger to give you this almost fairy tale quality to the space. And that's why they feel a little bit abnormally huge. If they do,
Oh,
then you have a
I don't. I mean, this compared to the scale of the room and her life and her grandness that she's trying to put out there. I think the scale is good. I agree
thank
with
you.
you.
Well, you have tremendous taste, I would
Yes,
say.
well, yes, I do. But I mean, the decor, your decorator Sandro did such a fantastic job
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
textiles and the timing and the period and everything. And I think too, which is always important, I think when we decorate, is not everybody's decorating. This is set in 1977. You look
Mm.
at this room and you know it's not 77, but the the quality of her life is there, the grandness, as you were saying, is with the chandeliers and everything, you know.
No, exactly. Yeah, Sandro, it was the first time I worked with Sandro. He was absolutely delightful. He's become a very good friend, and I'm sure we'll collaborate again. And what I loved about him is that, you know, I'm quite a bossy designer, and I'm quite, you know, I'll demand most of the work the way you see it. But he was wonderful. He would come in this very gentle, sweet Italian man, and he would add these little touches that would just take it to the next level. He really is a talent. I hired him based on his work. He was one of the assistant decorators on the amazing film Call Me by Your Name. Do you remember that
Yes.
film from
Oh,
years ago?
yes.
And I
Yeah.
remember the interiors in Call Me by Your Name, and just how it, even though I didn't grow up in Italy, it reminded me of my own childhood and coming of age, and that the film just sort of stayed with me as a remarkable piece of interior design. And it wasn't recognized in the way that it should have been, I felt, that year
Yeah.
for the art direction, because it was such a simplistic
Yeah.
design in so many ways. And that's what made it so wonderful. But anyway, I wanted Sandro on the team to hopefully bring some of that energy into my own design, which can sometimes be, by my own admission, a little bombastic and show offy. I wanted him to bring some of that sort of, uh, I suppose, uh, sobriety to the spaces. And I would say that sets like the one you're looking at now are
Living
generally
room.
a little more of Sandro's personality, and
Hmm.
the sets like the bedroom with the giant bed and the dressing room with, you know,
I would
all
say that.
that stuff, those are more me, you know. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
me, the
The
kitchen
bedroom.
is me, the bedroom is me, but the spaces that are a little bit more restrained and sophisticated are definitely more Sandro. And that's why we had such a wonderful partnership on this project.
Her dressing room is fantastic. And I loved like they do some, you know, very very informative um shots of like religious figures
Oh yes.
and her pictures
Yeah.
and the bus. I mean, this one scene
Mm.
with all of the Greek and Roman busts that you
Mm.
have, was that what choice was made there? Was that something you saw in research or was that?
No, I suppose in a way I've always been a fan of Peter Greenaway, and he had a film you may recall called The Belly of an Architect,
Yes.
in which a lot of statuary was used as symbolism for the characters. And when we were talking about Maria and talking about her personality, Pablo was desperate to, I think, project her personality into the set and make the audience somehow believe that the set was giving you a message about who she was. And so for me, treating these sets like opera stages really became a concept. And one of
Hmm.
them was to take these wonderful busts, particularly broken, damaged busts with sort of snapped noses and half of the face missing, was a wonderful sort of, I suppose, sort of visual cue to the audience to think of Maria's personality as
Yeah.
being somewhat broken but very beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's really what the idea was, if that makes any sense.
Oh,
And
yeah.
certainly, I think it works in the film. In the context of her spending her life on stage. The the line between reality and fantasy for Maria at this point in her life is quite thin, and
Right.
so it's quite nice to think that we could be on an opera stage or we could be in her home. Hence things like the tapestries that you see
Yeah.
here.
I also love this concept in the closet of the clothes are
Yes.
there. It's not like a closed in closet. Like you've created this closet around her.
Yeah. Well, the clothes
The
needed
clothes,
to be
yeah,
worshipped,
the
you know.
clothes in the film are so fantastic. So
Yeah, well, look, Massimo is a master of costume, and he, after we had those hero pieces of costume that Maria was going to wear on stage and to the Dorchester and all these amazing events through the 50s and 60s, I suggested to Pablo that we should recall them and see them in her dressing room to remind the audience of this journey she had had.
Yeah.
And we sourced a lot of the clothes ourselves at the set decorating department, not costume, sourced all these shoes and hat boxes and handbags and, of course, silk gloves, and dresses and garments to sort of suit the color scheme of the set, but
Hmm.
also act as wonderful filler between Massimo's sort of hero pieces of costume, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is, the color palette is there. And it, to me, it meant that these are the good things I'm wearing, but I also have another huge closet somewhere else. Like I just kept envisioning, like when she goes in to get her pills and everything and those little things, I was like, oh, there's like another closet somewhere.
Oh,
But
yes.
this is like
Yeah.
your day. This is like used. We're using these, so we're taking these out, like, or we're showing them off a little or something. I don't
Exactly,
know. It's
exactly. And
so.
we built all these shelves, of
Oh,
course.
that's right. Yeah, I was gonna ask because they're beautifully made. I mean, the brass and the wood and like and the lights on them and
Right,
I
right.
want
No, they're
one.
custom made. I wanted to show off the shoes.
Yeah,
I look, I'm a British guy, right? So I have a thing for clothes as well, and
yeah.
I wanted to show her vast array of gorgeous shoes that she had. We found out some astounding numbers when it came to Maria's personal effects. 5,000 pairs of silk gloves, for
Oh,
example,
wow.
over 8,000 pairs of shoes. She had enormous amounts of clothes. And certainly when we visited her apartment, the uh, shocking size of the room that was dedicated to her wardrobe equaled one of her drawing rooms. So
Wow.
it was a very big event. So although what you're looking at is a more theatrical interpretation by myself and the team of Maria's dressing room, there are some elements of truth here, you know?
Oh, yeah. I also wanted to ask, there's in this, and then when she's on the floor in the drawing room, I believe, it there's green, there's this green light. And
Yes,
I wondered about that with the DP is Edward Larshman, right?
right, right.
Um, was that decision based on her emotion or just what the contrast, or how was that decided?
We had two things going on really, that we had a sort of a master plan of showing Maria's mood through color,
Mm.
the color of the set, color of the lighting, color of everything. But the green came about because, in a way, what I think it was able to do was attach a kind of an iconic feel to this apartment that made it very, very unique and strangely made it feel very 70s.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we tried several colors. There was a blue that we tried, and Ed and I decided that that didn't really work. We also tried almost kind of like a rust orange, but
Mm.
that almost felt weirdly like we were getting into sort of the red light district. It didn't work at all. So we ended up settling on this green, which was very interesting because this picture really demonstrates exactly what I'm about to say, which is, for the first time in my life, I chose the colors of a set based on the couture fashion runways
Mm.
of the late 70s in Paris, rather than looking through interior design magazines. I didn't look at any 70s interior design magazines, partly because I felt there was an experiment to go on here that could bring great reward if we got it right. And secondly, because I was so tired of seeing those almost stereotypical kind of period sets
Right.
that you see where it's okay, we're in the 70s, they're using, orange and it just becomes a cliche. And so I wanted something a little richer and more sophisticated. And so I started looking at the fashions of Yves Saint Laurent, who was a personal friend of Maria's, of Sonia Rykiel, went deeper, Pierre Cardin, Christian Dior. I looked at all of the fashion houses of the time to see what colors they were favoring. And there was this huge lean towards these deep, deep reds and rusts and oranges, but
Mm.
also these sort of velvety browns and sort of very creamy whites. But then there'd be these pops of color. And one of those pops of color was this green and this sort of off green turquoise. And so those colors ended up coming through in the light as a part of that discovery.
I mean, it bathes the set beautifully too. I
I
mean,
think
it,
so.
it plays off of her wardrobe, it plays off of the chairs, it plays off of those beautiful drapes and sheers that are there. It's just
Yeah.
so great.
And,
And
in a way, this scene here where she's in the evening, it's nighttime, she's listening to her own records, they're spread around her. All of this was very carefully art directed. I mean, I
yeah,
placed all those records myself.
yeah,
And, it's kind of quite surreal to have green light coming through. But
yeah,
on the other hand, you could kind of believe it. 1970s Paris, this
yeah,
could be the glow of a street light
yeah.
or some other kind of piece of neon or something out of the window. So it's a wonderful feeling and a very bold. I think it was a bold decision, but I think it works.
I definitely, and then I mean you have it too, I mean in the
Yes.
dressing room, which when those lights are on and then the green is behind it is also gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you do have the screen in the kitchen
Right.
that's
Right.
placed in these window panes. That's
Yeah. Yeah. It's bizarre. I remember when I said to my team, we're going to have a salmon and avocado color scheme. They all looked at me as though I was absolutely insane. But of course, it never ends up just being avocado and salmon. You end up bringing all these other textures and materials into a space that somehow characterize it and bring it all together. And, this again was one of those bold experiments that, thank goodness, just really worked, I think. I mean, for me, it works, and seems to feel right for a
oh
Parisian
yeah.
kitchen. And there's a casualness to it. This is definitely one of the spaces where Maria would never bring anyone from Paris
Right.
Mat,
Right.
Time magazine. They would never see this. But we, as the audience, get to experience Bruna flipping an omelet and listening to her sing. That's being on the inside.
And as in that Q&A, the actress talked about practicing the omelet flip and
Oh my goodness.
practicing,
Oh
practicing.
my
So
goodness.
yeah. But yeah, you gotta, I mean, that's a skill she'll have her whole life. So I'm sure she was glad to get it. Um,
Exactly.
there's a frame here of these two rooms
Right.
and the difference that you've given them of the deep wall paneling in the dark wood and then
Mm.
the lightness of the other room
Yes.
was that and that fireplace, which I could not find a shot of. But that fireplace is magnificent.
That's always the danger of our job. You put a
I
lot of
know.
work into something. You
I
you
know.
you sketch things. You draw it out. The plasterers make the molds. You get this whole thing together. Special effects come in, make it so it actually works as a fireplace, and then you see a quarter of it in the corner of a frame.
Yeah.
That's filmmaking, right?
Yes, it is. It really is passion and passion just in the split second. But it's worth it. I mean, it's there. It's worth it.
It's
Everyone knows
there.
it
It's
was
there.
there.
As are all the moldings around the doors. Yeah.
Gorgeous, gorgeous work by
Thank
the
you.
by the construction and everything for
Yeah.
these rooms. And
Yeah.
then when you have her, well, wait, when this room is she sitting in that room also? Just the textures that were selected for the sofa and the tapestry over the table and the large paintings, the scale of everything for her really plays into her character so much. It's just beautiful.
It really does. I actually zipped into this and changed the tablecloth in
Mm.
this frame because there was actually a plain sort of maroon kind of covering over that little oak table there where she's using the ashtray. And I remember looking through the viewfinder and thinking, if I don't change this now, I'm never going to forgive myself. So I remember getting permission from Pablo, running into the shot. I'd found this beautiful uh, sort of throw. And I just wrapped it around there so it looked a bit like a tablecloth and of that table. And it just sort of harmonized the whole set with these rich colors, you know. But it's amazing how one thing can throw it off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that tablecloth was fine, but when you see it in the camera, sometimes and a lot of times we don't have time. I'm sure Pablo was on to the next set or like, busy
Yeah.
doing something. You like it's just that like you open these sets and then they change the shot on you and then you're like, why didn't I know that that was happening? I would have done this or that. I mean, you're lucky you were there.
Well, I was there every day.
Were you there?
So one of the things on bigger films, I can't be there, obviously.
Right.
On Pablo productions, I have a little portable chair and table, camping table. And I'm in the next room, literally drawing sets and emailing my art department back at the main art department.
Right.
But I'm there every day. So Pablo insists on me being his standby.
Oh, that's
So
great.
I actually am responsible for anything you see that you don't like. I apologize because I was there. It was me, not the prop men, moving pill bottles and adjusting busts and changing lamps and purposefully, in this case, having a lampshade that's a little off. That's all me. It's a wonderful opportunity as a designer. You never have to do the classic thing of going to dailies and saying, what were they thinking? Why
Right.
did they just do this or do that? No, no, I was there. And if it's not right, it's me.
I
It's
think
nothing
that's
else.
a wonderful opportunity
Oh
and
my goodness.
not something you get in filmmaking or
No.
TV. I mean, television, you don't get it in TV for sure, but um, in filmmaking, to be that collaborative for every shot is
Yeah.
really, really amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great duo. That's a great.
No, I was very, very lucky to be there. As I say, it's like this was an impromptu set. It wasn't, or not the set, the setup,
So,
which, and Pablo has these magical character moments which enrich Stephen Knight's script. And he said there's something missing. And he'd been saying it for about 2 days. So there's something missing, there's something missing. And in the end, that thing that was missing was a moment where you saw Maria simply enjoying time with Furuko and Bruna as a little family unit. So he turned to me at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and said, I need you to just come up with something. Just come up with something. I don't know, cards, drafts, chess, whatever it is, come up with a game that they can be playing and enjoying, and let's just see what they do. And this was the magical moment where Maria said, when I'm gone, please stay together. It was such a
yeah.
heart-wrenching moment. Unscripted, purely Angie,
Oh,
purely
wow.
those two incredible actors, all caught on film. And Pablo will always do this thing where he'll look over at me, kind of like a 10-year-old and go, oh, we've got this. There are a couple of moments like that. For example, when the dogs cry, when
Oh, that's so
Maria
sad. I was,
dies,
that's so
that's not
sad.
sound effects. Those little dogs, and that's the only casting I've ever done in a film. I cast the dogs. They came in and started crying when they saw Angie on the floor because they got to know Angie over the couple of months that we were shooting really well. They were with her all the time. So when they came in and saw her on the floor, they were genuinely distressed. So that's not sound effects. That's really the dogs crying.
Oh, well, I think they should be nominated. I think they're cute. They cute. I mean, they had perfect timing. I was like, how they must have cued those dogs somehow to like cry.
It seems that way, but no. And there was never any. And we had a couple of tricks to keep the dogs with Angie and in check, but getting them to cry on cue was not one of them. So that
Wow.
was all their intuition. Clever
Wow.
actors.
Bravo, doggies. That was awesome. I mean, it's, I guess, too, like you're saying, when you get this time to rehearse and you get this time, it's so important. I mean, all of it, the prep is so important. And how much prep did you have on this?
So we had about, let's see, he called me in May, June, July. I had about 3 months
Mm-hmm.
before we went to camera.
Right.
So, but most of my crew came on about 8 weeks out. So I had about, a month to 6 weeks ahead of them to create things like what you're seeing, artwork, and just get everything
Her bedroom.
ready. So when the crew came in, there was a clear blueprint for them.
And this sketch that you have of her bedroom and her headboard is this is your sketch. Do you use are this is this on the iPad? Is this sketched? Is this
Yeah, so I'll generally use I generally do pencil sketches first,
Mhm.
and partly just for convenience, I'll take with my iPhone a snapshot of the pencil sketch, get that into Photoshop,
Yeah.
and then produce the painting as you see it. So this is a Photoshop piece. Um, but there are other times when I'll just fancy doing a watercolor and just use traditional watercolor and then no digital. And but the most sort of mixed mediums that I used were all the backings for the operas. So all the backdrops for the operas I actually painted myself.
Okay.
And those, what I would do is, yeah, like for example, there. So for this one, which again, you'll see the rough sketch in the script book. I was
Mhm.
probably sitting on it next to Pablo on a plane somewhere and sketched it, showed him, got his blessing. And then this one, for example, I painted at about, I think it was 3 foot by 1.5 feet high, just on a piece of board with gouache. And then I photographed that. And then we blew that up as a print to about 6 feet. And then the 6 foot print, I had to go over and paint again because it got soft.
Hmm.
And then once I've done that, we'll photograph the 6 foot print, and then I'll get that into Photoshop and put some finishing touches on it, and it will go to get printed at this enormous scale.
And then the choice in the film going back and forth from black and white to color, did that in help your decisions in palette, or did that
Yeah.
because you have to to make the intensity for black and white and everything? How did you work with that?
Absolutely. It was the first time I'd worked in black and white. I was ever so nervous about it because certain colors behave very strangely. This is a great example here. For example, these roses were described as 1,000 red roses. And what I realized in some film tests, which I did with Ed ahead of time, camera tests, is that red roses just go black.
Right, right. You just
So I ended up using peach. Peach roses ended up being the color that felt as though they could be interpreted as red or pink or something very sexy and romantic. It sort of became almost irrelevant what color they were. More important to me was how many we had. And as written in Stephen Knight's script, 1,000 roses was not enough. So we ended up using about 5,000 roses
yeah.
to look like 1,000 roses.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you've been there.
I've
And
done.
they were all real and needed permanent upkeep. But there's a wonderful contrast with the foliage around them. They really pop against the green.
Oh yeah. And I think, I mean, peach itself, and I think the arrangements and everything look period.
Yes.
It also lends to the period of everything around it. That was
Well,
gorgeous.
everything had to be correct. That was, 59, and there was a sort of a jazz band, and
Yeah.
the setting was more ballroom than swing. This was still very conservative. And they met at the Dorchester in London, which would have been extremely conservative in 1959.
I do want to get back to her bedroom for a second though,
Right.
because the walls, is that all hand painted? Is that a
It's
wallpaper or
it's a wallpaper. So again, guilty as charged. I painted this as a small tableau like this. I had an elevation of the wall measured out. and stuck that down onto a piece of board. I already knew what I was doing with the bed because the bed we created, again, the
Mhm.
bed I sketched out on a piece of tracing paper on the side of uh, I think it was next to the bathrooms in the production office, but I got the size of the bed which we wanted. We wanted something very theatrical and dramatic. And so once I had the size of the bed, it was just simply about finding something to frame the bed and make it feel as though Maria was stepping out of an opera. And of
Mm.
course, it's, you know, because I'm invested in the artwork and the painting, and I'm the one doing the artwork, I have a stronger sense, I think, of discipline of making sure that that painting looks exactly like the set. You know, to me, that is incredibly important.
Well, yes, because you expect other people to respect that too. So then you're doing it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just gorgeous. And it's so impactful of like this princess or this queen bed that you've.
I kept calling it, I kept saying to Sandro, our wonderful decorator, he said, what is this bed you keep talking about? Before I paint, so what's this bed you keep? I said, just think, it's very fairy tale. Think the
Yeah.
princess and the pea. You know,
Yes,
that's
yes,
really what
exactly.
we're doing here. She's a princess in her own world. There is one photograph which you can look up on the internet. Again, I think it's in my script, where you can actually see a very candid Polaroid taken by Bruna of Maria in bed. And there is a very ornate Baroque headboard behind her. It's not this, but it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
And I just took that and exaggerated it to the best that I could, you know?
Oh, yeah. I also want to call out this beautiful piece that you have built in here
Yes.
that, you know, keeps going. People keep walking past it and everything, but what
Yeah.
a beautiful piece and so French, so,
Yeah.
you know, ornate. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful cabinet that's built into the corner of the room.
Yeah. Well, very she had eclectic taste, but she was quite specific. You know, she liked Baroque. We've discussed that. She loved a lot of French furniture, Louis XIV, and so on. So she had these very specific styles that she always leaned towards and collected. And we tried very hard to source and find a lot of these pieces in the prop houses of London and Rome, which is where most of this stuff came to the set in Budapest. Um, and of course, she liked Art Deco. I guess that was the American in her.
Mm.
And she loved that sort of classic 30s, you know, Art Deco style. And we found a number of pieces there. So it was a lot of fun dressing the set with Sandro and sort of cherry picking these wonderful pieces and making sure they sat beautifully in the space, you know, and worked. But as you say, this cabinet was actually built into the set. We had some remarkable craftsmen on this film.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the first maybe, I don't know, half hour or something, I was like, wow, where did they find this apartment? Look at this
That's
location.
the right response. That
Yes,
means
no.
we did our jobs.
And then with the moving the piano from room to room and everything, I was like, I think this is that.
Yeah.
Um, in choosing the location of the theaters
Yes.
had, um, there's another beautiful black drop, but this main theater where she's trying to get
Yes.
her voice back and everything. And again, the green coming through.
That's right.
Where is this and how did you make the decision for this to be her theater?
So this is actually it was the first time this space has ever been shot.
Hmm.
This is I actually saw this
Exciting,
space.
isn't it? Isn't it exciting when you get a location no one's had before?
Yeah, I visited this space several years earlier on an Ang Lee film called Gemini Man. And
Hmm.
it didn't really have a place in that film. But I remember I was such a geek for the architecture of Budapest. I made it my business, very busybody-ish, to go around and look at all these amazing places. And I remember going here. So this is the Music Academy. So it's a real musical academy with real students. And this is their assembly hall. and their presentation hall. So you'll notice when she's singing and we're looking back at the stage, it really isn't a proper stage as we know it. There's no curtains,
Yeah.
there's no scene docks. It's not a place where there's an opening. It's an exposed stage with an enormous kind of organ center stage right behind her.
I don't know.
And Pablo and I visited here. He fell in love with it. Again, the rich greens and the golds were so unique, so kind of 70s in a way. We couldn't resist but make this the place where she would go and train. Interestingly enough, the scene where she's recorded from the lighting control room that's up
Right.
above, that lighting control room doesn't exist.
Oh, you are.
We had to build that. And the only condition of this location is that we had to take it out every night.
Wow.
No reason.
No reason.
That was the rule. So every morning we'd come in at 4 o'clock in the morning and begin the construction all over again. It was boring.
That was
So boring to have to do this. Like we would finish at, 7 o'clock at night. Nothing was going to happen in this space, but the rule was to shoot there. The condition was you had to remove this thing. So we had 3 shooting days here. Can you imagine?
every day, taking it in and out, in and out.
Taking it in
No
and
reason.
out. But it looks authentic. I think the shot
Oh,
where
yeah.
Porter positions the mic to record Maria and those shots looking down, it all looks really, really authentic. We did such a nice job, I think,
Oh, yeah.
making that look like it belonged there.
It's definitely seamless. I thought it was the room. So, yeah. I love that theater. I mean, I thought to myself, the period of it is so perfect. The
Yeah.
period green and everything. And I didn't know if you had to paint or if you had to enhance that or
No, I won't lie to you. This was
beautiful.
exactly as it was.
Um, the set where Onassis is at his end. I mean, this is so dramatically different than the rest of the film. Where
Right.
did your concept come for this and the location of it?
This was one of those wonderful brutalist kind of buildings that the I suppose the Russians built when when they sort of were in Hungary and running things there. And this space actually was in an educational institution. It's actually a lecture hall, a small lecture hall. So you can probably imagine where Onassis is right behind him were the blackboards and the whiteboards, and there were seats bolted in a semicircle facing that. And we had to unbolt the seats, remove them, put a new floor in so that you couldn't see all the holes, hang this wonderful kind of thick, semi-transparent plastic up, which was very icky and very perfect and sort
Oh,
of isolating in many ways. But I purposely went into this bizarre, slightly, dare I say, 2001 kind of aesthetic for this scene because I wanted to feel a sense of isolation
yeah,
for this man who had it all
yeah.
and where he ends up at the end of his life. And of course, when Maria comes in to see him, that's highlighted. Her warmth and her love towards a man who's really disrespected her, I think is heightened by the bizarre coldness of this room.
Yeah.
These strange balls as well were, and forgive me for getting a little kind of over the top dramatic here. I imagine that as he was lying in his deathbed, again going back to my sort of 2001 analogy here, these are almost the planets
Hmm.
circling around the sun, and aligning themselves for his death. And I just loved seeing layer upon layer of meaning behind this space. I was very, very happy when we got to use it. It had never been shot again. Nobody ever wanted to go in there and spend the time to unbolt the seats, remove them, set this space up as, a hospital. It was very, very on purpose that none of the flowers from well wishers are near him. I
Mm.
wanted him to feel like a lonely, old, sad human being. Famously, apparently, the only thing he had by his bed when he passed away was a notebook, a pencil, and a calculator.
Oh, God.
I know. True
Oh.
story.
It really visually tells the story here when you get to this point and she's walking that long hallway and there's echoing
Yeah.
and no one's around except for like some guards or some people
Right.
you can go in
Right.
now and he's alone and it's like what a life you could have had you
Yeah.
know and it's very dramatic but very poignant in storytelling this set I thought just beautiful.
Thank you for noticing. I put a lot of effort into this set, and you get to that point sometimes. This was near the end of the shoot, and everyone was very tired, and I was trying to do this big statement, and everyone was kind of going, oh, "Do we really have to do this? Can't we just go to a hospital?" Going, and it's
Yeah.
as a
I know it.
designer or a decorator, we have our passion and we
Yeah.
have our vision to fulfill. And unless you approach a project with the same fire and desire to make it the best you can all the way through, you end up with a mediocre film or
Yeah.
or visual story. And I just can't, I can never do that. So I put my gang through a lot to get this set, but it means a lot to me that you've noticed it as a
Oh,
creative person, because I thought it was an important
great.
set too.
It's great. It's such a point in the story too. I mean, it's, for her and for him and just the overall of her whole life and everything.
It's a bookend in a way, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
I have one last thing.
Oh, yes.
This scene, the exterior and
Yes.
the leaves. I heard tons and tons of leaves that you had to find and source and everything, but and then in
Yes.
the rain, can you tell us the selection of this
I
location?
can. This is another one of Pablo's famous X shots, which means it's an unscripted vision
Hmm.
from our incredible director. And I'm always ready for these. This one I had some time to prepare. So I got the call from Pablo, you know, Guy, I've got to have this scene. It's going to be amazing. It's Madame Butterfly. We're going to have the geishas run in and surround her, and it's going to be a vision. But I want it to feel very real. I want a full orchestra dressed in white, all playing.
Yes, the
And
harp.
I immediately realized that not a single musician was going to want to have their instruments wet,
Yes.
destroy them. And these are serious musicians. So what you're seeing here was actually musicians who were miming
Hmm.
to playback. So everything from the harp to each violin to every instrument that you see here was either bought as a second-hand or a forgotten, dusty old instrument. A whole bunch of these instruments came from a bunch of gypsies that we bought things from out in the countryside, and all of
Whatever
these,
it takes. Whatever it takes. We'll
yeah,
find it wherever it
and
goes.
and we refurbished all these instruments and asked the musicians to simply mime the part. And
Hmm.
then just out of shot, we had an extraordinary array of rain bars mounted on cranes that would just, absolutely send down this torrential rain between takes. Very cold it was, I remember.
Oh,
We had shot autumn in our 4-day Paris shoot, but there were no fallen leaves. So all of the leaves that you see in Paris were actually shipped in bags. We had 5,000 bags of leaves, which we bought into Paris to dress it as though it was the fall. And Ed tweaked the color of the trees to look a little more warm and yellow. They were actually green. It was still very warm and summery in Paris.
Hmm.
And I remember nobody wanted to spread the leaves in Paris. The art directors there were, oh, we don't do that here. And I said, well, look, I'm just going to do it myself then. And they sort of felt guilty and mucked
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
We got it done. But here in Budapest, it was full on autumn, and we had yet more hundreds and thousands of leaves to lay down for this scene in particular. But it has a wonderful impact. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
autumn of her life, it's the winter of her life, and this incredible scene. There's so little of this scene in the film.
I
It makes
know.
my heart cry. There are absolutely magical shots of Angie just looking up to the skies. And I talked to our makeup team about very carefully choosing makeup that would drip in the rain. We
Mm.
have some amazing images of Angie. I think for a split second you see her with all the running makeup in this scene, and it's a very, very powerful image, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this wide is very quick. It's shot, it's very personal scene.
Yes.
So there's a lot of her and the rain and her umbrella and everything and her view of the orchestra and everything.
Mm.
But the wide of it is so impactful of like, man, she is losing it. Like
Yeah, she's losing it. Yeah.
she's really losing it. Poor
We had to make all the lanterns that you saw, all the painted lanterns had to be protected with a strange mix of, let me get this right, I think it was pig oil and
oh,
varnish that we used to spray all of the lanterns to protect those very delicate cherry blossom designs that we put on them. And I remember when the actresses all came in, they were all holding the lanterns. Some of them had them over their shoulders. Some of them were dragging them on the ground. I got ever so upset with them. And I got in front of them and I said, look, you have to hold these lanterns at this height. And I remember I was quite strict. I would dive in there between takes and sort of correct them and lift them.
yeah.
And luckily, on the takes that we used, all the lanterns are there at the same height. And it looks very beautiful when they all surround Maria at that moment, you know.
It's beautiful, beautiful scene. And the colors and everything against the starkness of the building and everything is really beautiful.
Yeah, that was the goal, to bring in that rich golden, orange, and red, vivid red
Mm.
against this sort of monochromatic backdrop. Yeah.
Can I ask you one thing? Do you have a favorite project you've ever done? I mean, you have so many, you have so many great designs and
I don't know. You know, it's really hard to talk about that. I mean, I would say for me, there's a little bit of every one of these
mhm.
projects that I've been very lucky to have worked on, that hold a very special place in my heart. It's, you know what it's like. You're a creative person. You sort of spawn these creative ideas and these designs. You're involved with a group of people in a very intense creative process for a limited period of time, and they're like your children almost. They're not
Uh,
quite as important as your children, but they're almost. And so for every film that I've done, you know, there have been very proud and special moments, whether it's, you know, Steve Jobs with Danny Boyle, or Inception with Christopher Nolan, or Indiana Jones with Steven Spielberg, or Michael Mann, you know, traveling all around Southeast Asia with such a professional and brilliant man as Michael Mann. Um, you know, all these directors and creators I feel extremely lucky to have worked with. And as time goes on, those memories only get richer and become more romanticized. You forget all the difficult stuff and you only remember the good
yeah.
bit, you know. And but I feel very, very lucky. I've worked with so many of my heroes and on so many magical projects So it's hard to pinpoint it to one film, if that makes sense to you.
Oh yeah, I know. And usually a lot of people are like, well, I just did this one, so it's kind of my favorite. I would have to say though, I think they are lucky to have worked with you. I think what you
Oh,
bring to these
thank you.
projects is so unreal and inspiring to decorators and designers every project. So I thank you for the inspiration. I've enjoyed your work so much. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me on. I've really appreciated talking to you about this project. It's a very special one, I agree.
It is. It's beautiful. So congratulations. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome.